This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Natalie Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China escalates a month-long spat targeting 40 Japanese companies. Half of them slapped with export controls over alleged military links, and the other half placed under tighter watch on dual-use goods. But China also urges the U.S. to scrap its new tariffs, signaling it's ready for fresh trade talks after Donald Trump warned of even higher duties for countries playing games following a landmark Supreme Court ruling. Panama takes control of 2 Canal ports from CK Hutchison, drawing sharp criticism from the government in Hong Kong. And jailed former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol appeals his life sentence for insurrection. His lawyers say they will challenge the ruling as excessive and contradictory. Also on the bulletin, China is poised to approve a major update to its national development blueprint at next week's so-called Two Sessions gathering of the nation's top leaders. China has added 20 Japanese companies to its export control list, saying that they supply Japan's military. With immediate effect, Chinese exporters are barred from providing these firms with dual-use goods. Well, the companies include major manufacturers such as Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Kawasaki Heavy Industries, and NEC. Beijing accuses them of helping to enhance Japan's military capabilities. In addition, China placed 20 businesses on a separate watch list, subjecting them to stricter export reviews, but said they could apply to be removed if they cooperate with Beijing's verification requirements. Tokyo saying that Beijing's latest move is, quote, absolutely unacceptable and deeply regrettable, adding that Japan has demanded for their withdrawal. And to help us better understand Beijing's actions and its implications, we've got Roland Lim here to give us the lowdown. Roland?
Thanks, Natalie. Right. China's Ministry of Commerce today added a group of Japanese companies to 2 export restriction lists. Now, one is called a control list, the other a watch list. And this affects all exports deemed to be of dual use, that's civilian and military use. Now, what's a control list? Well, it's essentially China's do not sell list for sensitive goods. Now, 20 Japanese companies like Mitsubishi Shipbuilding were placed on a control list because of their alleged military ties. Now, China now prohibits the export of dual-use goods to them and bars overseas entities or individuals from transferring China-origin dual-use items to these firms. Another 20 companies, including Subaru, were put on a watch list after China said it could not verify their end users or intended uses. Now, Japanese exporters can no longer use standard licenses. Instead, they must apply for specific permits, submitting risk assessments and written commitments that the goods will not support Japan's military. And of course, exports tied to military use will not be approved. China's Commerce Ministry says the curbs are meant to stop Chinese tech from bolstering Japan's military, a political and security concern for Beijing. Now, ties have worsened since Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's November speech, in which she said a hypothetical attack on Taiwan could pose an existential threat, warranting military action under Japan's pacifist constitution. The government has also accelerated plans to raise defense spending to 2% of GDP, approving a record $58 billion for fiscal 2026. Now, China and Japan have long-standing geopolitical tensions, including disputes over security and military postures in East Asia. Although China frames the action as legal and reasonable, it reflects an element of strategic competition and suspicion regarding Japan's military direction. Over the past several years, the U.S. has restricted advanced AI chips to China on similar grounds. And Japan has also aligned with U.S. policy, with export controls on semiconductor manufacturing equipment and precision tools to China. The news triggering a sell-off in Tokyo's defense and heavy machinery sectors. Tech giant NEC leading the declines after 2 of its units were added to the list. Other manufacturing giants such as Mitsubishi, Kawasaki, and IHI also losing ground. But the overall sentiment across Japan's financial markets remains stable. Major indices close in positive territory. The broader Nikkei 225, 0.9%. The tech-focused topics up 0.2%, while the Japanese yen hovering around the 155 threshold against the dollar.
Also on trade, China has urged the United States to withdraw its newly imposed 10% tariff that takes effect today. Well, the Commerce Ministry says Beijing would determine at an appropriate time whether to adjust its countermeasures in response to Donald Trump's latest move. Beijing, meantime, has signaled willingness to engage in another round of trade negotiations. The new duties, initially set at 10%, will last for 150 days unless Congress extends it. Well, two of the world's largest economies have remained at odds over trade policies, with tariffs continuing to weigh on bilateral relations. Now, the U.S. president has indicated the tariff rate could rise to 15%. Though the timeline for implementing that higher levy has not been finalized. Exemptions are expected to continue for selected goods. The move follows last week's Supreme Court decision that ruled President Trump's sweeping global tariffs as unlawful. Now, Tokyo is seeking favorable treatment under the new U.S. tariff regime. Japanese Trade Minister Ryose Akazawa and U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick reaffirmed during a call that the two countries will continue to implement the agreement reached last year in good faith and without delay. Well, meantime, Taiwan says it will work with the U.S. to ensure the beneficial terms it has already agreed to do, that it does not change. The island has struck two deals with Washington to lower the tariffs on exported goods to 15% from 20%. Taipei says it's confident that the Trump administration will keep its word.
所以这不是所谓重启谈判，这个是我们会积极的向美方来联系了解，如何在既有 art 的一个谈判取得的相对优势待遇的基础之上，进一步积极了解美方后续法律政策工具的安排之下，能够持续的确保我国产业取得相对优势及最佳待遇，来确保我国国家级产业的最大利益。
For more, we are joined now by CNA's senior China editor, Olivia Xiong, in Beijing. First up, Olivia, what's China's response to latest developments in the U.S.?
Well, Telly, the Commerce Ministry releasing that statement there, continuing to call on the U.S. to cancel and refrain from unilateral tariffs, but also indicating that it's open to candid talks with America, also saying that it may look at adjusting its countermeasures. And all this is significant as observers say that now China may be entering into this potential visit by U.S. President Donald Trump to China with greater leverage, with these politically difficult tariffs now out of the way. It could pave the way for China to make some greater demands of the U.S. We know that last week, the White House had announced certain dates for President Trump's visit from March 31st to April 2nd. The Foreign Ministry today being asked if there were any further details on this, as they have not yet confirmed the visit. Have a listen.
联手外交对中美关系发挥着不可替代的战略引领作用。中美双方就特朗普总统访华事宜保持着沟通，但是关于你提到的具体问题，我目前没有可以提供的信息。
And this could potentially shift the calculus for China in negotiations. On Weibo, the former editor-in-chief of China's Global Times, Hu Xijin, wrote that Trump has now lost one card while China still holds all its cards. But no doubt China is watching Washington's next move, saying it will comprehensively assess the relevant U.S. measures. The Commerce Ministry noting that there are still possibly other tariffs that could be imposed under Section 301 aimed at addressing unfair trade practices. Also under Section 232, those referring to tariffs that can be imposed imposed on national security grounds. But analysts are saying that with the removal of these tariffs related to fentanyl and the reciprocal tariffs that were imposed on Liberation Day back in April, that this could help restore price competitiveness for China's exports. It may also trigger front-loading, with Chinese exporters keen to cash in on the lower tariff rates while they last. It will also remain to be seen how China may use its leverage on non-tariff issues. We know that Taiwan and U.S. arms sales to the Self-Ruled Island have been a major sticking point for Beijing. Also, American trade restrictions on advanced tech to China could also be another factor that comes into play. Ateli.
Olivia, what do you make of the timing of China's latest move on Japan?
Well, this is really seen as the latest move in the escalation of this diplomatic row between China and Japan that has gone on since November, after the Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi made those remarks that Japan could act if Taiwan did come under attack. And China has repeatedly opposed these remarks, calling for the Japanese leader to retract them on multiple occasions. And today at the Foreign Ministry briefing, the spokesperson was asked, why now? Why is China choosing to act now? And here is what she had to say.
为了维护国家安全和利益，履行防扩散等国际义务，中方依法依规采取措施，目的是制止日本再军事化和拥核企图，完全正当、合理、合法。
And I spoke to an analyst who said that what's clear is that China is not easing up on its pressure of Japan, despite the Japanese Prime Minister's landslide win at recent polls, also as she has spoken and warned about growing Chinese coercion. The move, however, this time may be dealing a more direct hit to specific companies, Japanese entities, following a broader ban on the export of dual-use goods that we had seen just last month. So the chill in China-Japan relations may be in place for some time, but analysts are also saying that it's not as escalatory to the point where there's no point of where it's not possible for them to be walked back. China's Commerce Ministry, we should note, also added that these latest measures target only a small number of Japanese entities and apply solely to dual-use items, that it does not affect normal China-Japan economic and trade exchanges, and that Japanese entities operating in good faith and in compliance with the law do not need to worry. Roland.
Many thanks for that update. CNA's senior China editor, Olivia Seong in Beijing. And of course, Roland will be back a little later with more business news. Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is heading to Beijing for his first official visit to China since taking office last May. Now, Merz is set to meet Premier Li Qiang, who had extended the invitation, as well as President Xi Jinping, with talks expected to focus on trade, economic cooperation, and stabilizing bilateral ties. The two-day trip comes amid record trade imbalances and growing concerns in Berlin over strategic dependence on China, particularly in key technologies and raw materials. And for more on that visit, we're joined now by CNA correspondent Crystal Chia, live from Shanghai. Crystal, so what can we expect from tomorrow's meeting between the leaders?
Well, Merz will be the first foreign leader to visit Beijing as China returns from the Chinese New Year holiday. Earlier this month, when Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with the Chancellor, he said that Beijing hopes to work with Berlin to bring their strategic partnership to a new level. So similarly, at today's Foreign Ministry briefing, the spokesperson reiterated that China stands ready to strengthen dialogue. Spokesperson Mao Ning said that the leaders of the two countries will exchange views on issues of common concern, and a sound relationship benefits both sides. China is ready to use this visit to boost mutual trust and jointly promote world peace. Now, on the German side, the Chancellor has said that he wants to pursue strategic partnerships. But he also earlier said this month that Germany must have no illusions about China's intentions to define a new multilateral order. His comments and these visits are coming against the backdrop of growing U.S. tariff pressures and Germany's widening trade deficit with China. Now, on the business side, Musk is expected to be traveling with a large delegation of about 30 business leaders. Now, he's known to be pro-business after advocating for deregulation, and he was in fact previously working for BlackRock before returning to politics. So when he's in China, he will visit Mercedes-Benz Group in Beijing and then travel to Hangzhou, where he will visit Unitree, the company famous for its dancing robots. Otelli?
What about underlying tensions, though? I mean, what's at stake in terms of their bilateral relationship? Any particular sticking points we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so at the center of these tensions is really Germany's widening trade deficit with China at a record 89 billion euros in 2025. Now, to better understand that figure, let's just look at cars. Now, in the past, Germany exported cars to China, and they basically taught China how to build cars. Now, today, that dynamic has shifted dramatically. We rarely see any German cars on the roads in China. Instead, China is exporting electric cars to Germany at a very fast pace and at very affordable prices. So that has led to where we are today, where about 1 in 10 cars sold in Europe is now made by Chinese brands such as MG, BYD. This puts pressure on European automakers who are still transitioning from combustion engines to electric models. But despite this trade deficit, Germany's economy still very much needs China, which is its top trading partner, and especially as the Chancellor has signaled that he now sees the US as an unreliable trading market. Now, as for Beijing, Europe is also becoming an increasingly important export market, especially as domestic demand slows at home. So these are all very complex economic and security issues that will be closely watched by observers during the visit. Otelli?
Yeah, many thanks for that. CNA's correspondent Crystal Chia's first live cross for East Asia Tonight from Shanghai. Right, on that note, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up, Standard Chartered's annual profit jumped 16%, but missed expectations. The lender also announces a $1.5 billion buyback and hikes its dividend. Plus, FedEx is suing the US government to recover tariffs paid on imported goods, joining hundreds of companies challenging the levies in court.
What if you think your boyfriend was cheating on you? What if a wife suspects her husband leads a double life?
Next Thursday?
What if you're caught in a compromising position? In India, a growing band of private detectives are capitalizing on the business of love.
Everyone is suffering from something or other in their lifetime. As you need doctors, as you need lawyers in your lifetime somehow, you need detectives also.
The Love Auditors. On demand at cna.asia. Saturday on Japan Hour. When you cycle around Hokkaido, you got to eat the amazing seafood. Enjoy the wonderful onsen.
Smell the minerals and the ion. This is what Japan is all about.
And meet the indigenous people of Hokkaido, the Ainus.
Yay! Nice to meet you.
Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA.
Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, no fuel surcharge from 216 Singapore dollars. And IHI.
Hi guys, Adams here, fighting from 300,000 in debts to 0 debts. Is to be accountable to myself, because once I post my journey out there, everyone will be watching my journey. Like I do what I say.
They require me to pay $600 a month. That's more than 1/4 of my salary. For the first 4 years, I wasn't able to pay anything.
Bankrupt, now what? Saturday on CNA.
The first thing in the morning as Asia wakes up to a new day. Get up to speed with major events shaping lives in the region and other parts of the world.
Putting things in perspective with eye-opening reports and expert analysis as a new era of global politics breeds power struggles and shifting alliances.
We get to the heart of the matter and take stock of the issues you're invested in with on-the-ground reports and wall-to-wall coverage.
Viewing it all from a regional lens because we put Asia first.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is now time for more business news with Roland Lim. So, Roland, we're going to start with Panama today. Tell us more about why authorities have basically abruptly taken control of two key ports run by Hong Kong's CK Hutchison. Tell us what's that all about.
Right, yes, CK Hutch has called the move unlawful and a forcible takeover. The move widens a high-stakes dispute with serious geopolitical and trade implications. Now, Panamanian authorities have taken control of two ports on the Panama Canal from CK Hutchison after the Hong Kong-based conglomerate's concession was annulled amid a row between the US and China. Hong Kong-based group says Panama's decision to cancel its contracts and grant temporary licenses to Maersk and MSC is unlawful, and that the move raises serious risks at the two terminals. Now, CK Hutch says it is liaising with its legal counsel to consider national and international legal action against Panama. Hong Kong's government has lodged a protest against the takeover, calling it a serious infringement of rights of businesses. Meanwhile, Panama has ordered the temporary occupation of both ports, which will revert to its National Maritime Authority. The Labour Minister says there will be no layoffs at the two terminals, which employs around 1,200 people. Yesterday, the country published a Supreme Court ruling issued in late January cancelling key port contracts held by a subsidiary of CK Hutch. The ruling comes amid growing US-China rivalry over global trade routes. Now, US President Trump last year accused China of effectively running the Panama Canal. Beijing denies the claim. The Panama Canal handles about 40% of US container traffic and 5% of world trade. Now, Standard Chartered Bank is launching a fresh $1.5 billion share buyback, even as its latest earnings fell somewhat short of expectations. The move comes just weeks after the bank's shares were rattled by the surprise exit of its chief financial officer. The emerging markets-focused lender says the buyback will begin imminently. It also lifted its full-year dividend by 65% from a year ago. Our CEO Bill Winters says the bank is seeing strong growth in its larger markets. A full-year pre-tax profit rose 16% to around $7 billion. That was driven by solid performances in wealth management and global banking, but it did miss the $7.2 billion average forecast by analysts. A fourth quarter profit also came in below estimates, partly weighed down by weaker trading income and a $233 million charge linked to the bank's Fit for Growth cost-cutting program. Former CFO Diego Di Giorgi recently left to join Apollo Global Management, removing a key architect of the efficiency drive. The Fit for Growth program enters its final year with a strategic update due in May. The lender's Hong Kong listed shares closing up 3% for the day. London shares currently going the other way, down 1.3%. Panasonic is handing over parts of its television business to China's Skyworth, signaling a major shift in an industry once led by Japan. It marks another step in the retreat of Japanese electronics giants from a market they dominated for decades. From April, Skyworth will take charge of sales, marketing, and logistics for Panasonic TVs in Europe and the US under a broad partnership agreement. Panasonic says the move will combine its strength in picture quality and audio tech with Skyworth's large-scale manufacturing power. The Japanese group will continue to run its TV operations at home and is reviewing options for other markets. The decision comes as Panasonic streamlines its businesses. It expects 12,000 employees to seek early retirement after announcing 10,000 job cuts back in May. The shift follows Sony's recent deal to hand majority control of its TV and home audio unit, including the Bravia brand, to China's TCL. Together, the agreements underscores the steady decline of Japanese dominance in global television. Sony, Panasonic and Sharp led the markets in the 80s and the 90s, but competition from South Korea's Samsung and LG and later Chinese manufacturers transformed TVs into a lower margin business. Chinese mainland markets back from a week-long holiday ending the day with solid gains as traders bet a U.S. tariffs reset will benefit the world's second biggest economy. Hong Kong stocks, however, giving up all of yesterday's 2.5% gain after Wall Street skidded overnight. Quick check on the Chinese currency after the benchmark lending rates there were left unchanged. Despite slower growth, the yuan is stronger against the greenback by 0.41%, 6.879 to the dollar, rising to a near three-year high of 6.7. And for the 9th straight month, China's commercial banks have left loan prime rates steady. The one-year loan prime rate, which anchors most new and outstanding loans, holds at 3%. Meanwhile, the 5-year rate, a key reference for mortgage pricing, that remains at 3.5%. But pressure is clearly building. Analysts point to soft fourth-quarter growth and lackluster factory readings, signs that the recovery is still struggling to gain traction. And that's fueling expectations the People's Bank of Japan could cut its key policy rate soon, maybe even before the annual gathering of China's top legislature next month. Now, FedEx is suing the Trump administration to reclaim a full refund of the money it paid for higher import tariffs. It is the first major U.S. company to file suit after last week's Supreme Court ruling that tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act were illegal. While the transportation company did not disclose the exact dollar value of the refund, FedEx estimated last September that U.S. trade policies would cost it around $1 billion for that fiscal year. Trump's tariffs brought in at least $130 billion to the U.S. government from American importers. The Supreme Court's decision has opened the door for hundreds of companies to seek a refund on additional import duties paid since 2025. Some other notable companies looking to claim a refund from tariffs are Costco, cosmetic company, Revlon, and Kawasaki Motors. And you're up to date with the business news. Otelli.
Thanks so very much, Roland. All right, coming up on East Asia tonight, we'll look ahead to China's key policy meeting next month, where the government announces its annual economic targets. And U.S. President Donald Trump set to deliver his first State of the Union of his second term. The reshaped U.S. role abroad, tensions with China, immigration among likely issues to be addressed.
The weather brought to you by Nippon Paint.
Washable, anti-mold, durable, strong coverage. Nippon Paint Odorless, Singapore's most popular paint brand.
CNA 938. News you can trust to start your day informed. to navigate your finances and your world, and to make sense of what matters. CNA 938, news you can trust.
Biodiversity is booming, which is inviting for some local foragers and farmers who embrace edible wildlife.
We're the largest organic banana grower in Singapore.
This is jam.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the mulberries are from the garden.
No, that's delicious.
Singapore is ramping up conservation efforts locally and across the region.
I really do love reptiles and finding out about them, so I really love my job.
Building must relate to the lives of the people.
目前还是一直要创新一些新的东西。我也不希望是人家把我看作是80岁的人。
There are those who dare to be different, who have made their mark in Singapore and beyond.
You have such big dreams, you want to change the world with your art.
Obviously, every fighter wants to win, so all you can do is to prepare yourself to win.
You're watching East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China has urged the U.S. to scrap its new 10% global tariffs that took effect today. Beijing says it will decide on countermeasures at an appropriate time, while signaling openness to fresh trade talks. China, meantime, has blacklisted 20 Japanese firms, placing them on an export control list for goods with civilian and military applications. They've been accused of helping enhance Japan's military capabilities. And Hong Kong protesting Panama's takeover of 2 key ports after a court voided a concession held by a CK Hutchison subsidiary. The Hong Kong conglomerate calls the move unlawful. Now, former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has filed an appeal against his life sentence for insurrection linked to his brief martial law declaration in 2024. Now, Yoon's legal team says it has, quote, a responsibility to clearly place on record the problems with the ruling. They added they took issue with the prosecution's indictment and would take action against the verdict. Last week, a court in Seoul found Mr. Yoon guilty of masterminding an insurrection. Judges ruled that he conspired with his then defense minister to subvert the constitutional order by deploying troops to parliament. He was also found guilty of abuse of authority, but narrowly avoided the death penalty sought by prosecutors. Mr. Yoon still faces a series of other trials linked to the martial law case. A North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, says the country will develop the quality of its economy over the next 5 years. Mr. Kim describing it as a full-scale progress phase and called for revolutionizing thought, technology and culture. That's in efforts to ensure new projects will be well managed over time. Now, the leader made the statement at the landmark party congress, which has been taking place since last week in Pyongyang. Well, that's where he was reappointed to helm the ruling Workers' Party. Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of the North Korean leader, was also promoted to a top position. She has been named party department director on the Central Committee, though it remains unclear which department she would lead. China's 2 sessions will begin in Beijing next week, and one of the key items of the agenda is examining and approving a key update to the country's development blueprint, China's 15th five-year plan. CNA's Tan Yu-guan tells us more about the document that maps out China's future path.
The 5-year plan is a format closely linked to the old Soviet Union in its centrally planned economy. Here's one poster promising more bread for the country from the 5-year plan. The Communist Party of China adopted a similar approach shortly after taking control of mainland China. China's early ties with its Soviet brother is evident here in this postage stamp, showing Chairman Mao Zedong shaking hands with the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. China issued its first 5-year plan in 1953. Back then, as a centrally planned economy, the plan laid out rigid quotas for essentials like grain, coal, and steel. More than 7 decades on, the Soviet Union is gone. But the 5-year plan has curiously remained intact in China as a tool to steer the economy. Only now, it's a very different animal. The The clearest sign of that came in 2006 when the title changed from 计划 to 规划. Both translate to plan in English, but the new phrasing 规划 signals broader strategic direction rather than stiff production targets. Still in China, these remain some of the most powerful words on paper because they direct attention and money to where Beijing wants them. Take the 12 five-year plan, for example. That's in 2011. It prioritizes 7 strategic emerging industries, among them next-generation information technology, new energy vehicles, and new energy. That directive 15 years ago helped set the runway for what we see today. China's lead in solar panels and wind farms, electric vehicles, and 5G technology. Now, the next question, what about the 15th five-year plan? For now, what's on the table are recommendations, in Chinese, 建议, issued by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China in October. That document has more than 3,000 words, with recommendations across 12 broad themes. Among them, calls for technological self-reliance and the push to foster industries of the future, including the so-called low-altitude economy, embodied artificial intelligence, and 6G mobile communications. There's also a continued push to boost household consumption, raising domestic demand as a share of GDP. Linked to that, recommendations to increase personal incomes. And another major goal, eliminating bottlenecks blocking a unified national market, including a very practical target, cutting logistics costs. These are the kinds of priorities Beijing hopes to log in through the 15th five-year plan. When delegates to the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, meet at the Great Hall of the People, many of these recommendations are likely to be adopted without major changes, to become the blueprint for what China calls socialist modernization by 2035.
Now, US President Donald Trump is set to deliver his first State of the Union address since taking office a second term. It comes amid what many see as a significant shift in America's role on the global stage. Domestic priorities such as the economy and immigration are expected to take center stage in his speech. China is also likely to feature prominently as the two superpowers remain locked in a broad strategic rivalry. Kate Fisher files this report for CNA from Washington.
With American warships gathering in the waters around Iran, the wars in Gaza and Ukraine ongoing, and Washington's energy strategy in Venezuela still in question, this upcoming presidential speech is likely to attract international scrutiny. But instead, in a midterm election year, analysts expect President Donald Trump to focus on a domestic audience.
The president is a bit reticent to talk too much about foreign policy because even members of his policy said he's too focused on winning that Nobel Prize and he's too focused on all these things going on internationally and not focused enough on domestic politics. So he's going to have to be very careful in how he does this. But of course, he wants to take a victory lap with Venezuela. He wants to talk about the peace deal that's going on between Israel and Hamas. And he wants to talk about the types of things that he's been doing with Iran and with Ukraine.
Millions of Americans will head to the polls this November, and the rising cost of living is one of the top voter concerns. Experts say the US leader may use his speech to directly address worries over affordability.
It's not just that people think that the president is getting it wrong on the economy, it's that they think he's distracted and that his actions have actually made things worse on the economy. So he needs to talk about what he's going to do to make people's pocketbooks a little bit fatter so that they are able to afford more than they are right now. The midterm elections are always a referendum on the president's handling of the economy, and right now that's not looking very good for him.
In defending his economic record, Donald Trump may tout his signature tariffs. But research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York shows about 90% of the costs from his tariffs have been borne by US consumers and businesses rather than by foreign exporters.
When I think about what we're going to experience in the year ahead, chaos. I think that there's a chance that trade policy and tariff environment could become a lot more uncertain.
But rebalancing the global economy to favour the US over China is a core part of President Trump's agenda.
We're putting out wars by our trade policies, and we're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, and our country is wealthy again and secure again, and it's part of national security.
Still, many experts argue that the administration's emphasis on trade policy as part of national security may come at a cost.
The national security strategy is so focused on China as an economic challenge and almost entirely ignores the security picture. It has not focused on the Indo-Pacific. It's frankly done a lot to push away some of our closest allies there. And I have to wonder, if you're sitting in Beijing, if you don't notice that Taiwan is mentioned exactly 0 times in this strategy.
It's highly unlikely that complicated foreign policy issue will make it into the president's speech on Tuesday either. Instead, many in his party, wary of losing their seat in this year's midterm elections, will want him to use his prime time spotlight to focus on the GOP's economic messaging as they fight to keep control of Congress during the last 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. For CNA, I'm Kate Fisher in Washington.
And do keep with us here on CNA. We'll bring you live coverage and analysis of President Trump's State of the Union address. It's happening at 9 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. here in Singapore tomorrow. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is heading to Asia this week, aiming to broaden international partnerships in areas such as energy, technology, AI, and critical minerals. He will start his 3-country tour in India on Thursday before visiting Australia and Japan. In a statement, Mr. Carney said that Canada is focused on what it can control in a more uncertain world. He says Canada is forging new partnerships abroad to create greater certainty, security, and prosperity at home. Mr. Carney has said that the US-led global order is fading and that Canada should not expect the old system to return even after President Trump leaves office. He says the country must expand non-US international trade to safeguard Canada's economic future. Now, India is a key target, and Mr. Carney says he wants to more than double two-way trade, and this could amount to some $50 billion by 2030. Tokyo is the final stop for the Canadian leader, where he will meet with his counterpart Sanae Takaichi. Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara said today that both leaders are expected to have frank discussions over issues such as regional and international developments, and that Japan hopes Mr. Carney's visit could lead to deeper cooperation between the two nations. And breaks up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight. Today marks 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. A deadly stalemate as the war grinds on, with more than 15,000 civilian deaths and some 10 million forced from their homes.
Fellow drivers, the unimaginable has happened. Machines have taken over.
We're radio DJs, and you'll know us as the Muttons from Class 95.
Welcome to Guangzhou!
In this 2-part series, we're off to China, one of the world's fastest growing markets for autonomous vehicles.
Look, there's no driver! There's no one there! It's like a ghost driver.
We want to find out what it takes to fully replace humans as drivers.
这个 robot taxi 就可以看到300米远的距离，它是360度去看，它没有死角，沒有盲區。
3 Singaporeans are coming along on this ride.
Your massage has started.
Oh my goodness, this is really good.
Wow, the pickup is quite strong. But I noticed it doesn't change lane often, and the speed is quite constant.
What can we expect from a driverless future?
I'm in an unmanned air taxi.
Who's driving now? Monday and Tuesday on CNA.
Hello.
Someone special.
Babe, 99.
Someone who dresses in like very expressive colors.
I need you to not be a yes man to me.
What does it mean to have an AI companion?
What do you think?
Getting some background vocals could elevate the song.
There's pizza. I think you love pizza.
I'm also in the mood for something new. How about we try the steaks and fries instead?
The engagement is so realistic.
The whole point of this is to really mimic a human.
Do you want to take a Wi-Fi together in the bubble?
What's going on? Can't quite figure out what's happening around us tonight.
Don't say anything, just watch the movie.
AI companions are essentially designer buddies.
Well, in this show, let's see how the AI companions work and why they sometimes beat humans at being human.
On this episode of Singapore Hour,
9 years ago, I bought a one-way ticket to London, and that opened my door to being a fashion photographer. Vogue, Elle, I never thought my work would end up in these big magazines.
Curious about Singapore while you're here on a short stay? Follow my itinerary for a quick venture on the flip side of this city.
Wow, that's a secret door.
You don't want to miss Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA.
It's now 4 years since Russia launched a full scale on Ukraine, and the toll is vast. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed on both sides. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced, and large areas of eastern and southern Ukraine lie in ruins. As peace talks falter, the worst conflict in Europe since World War II continues to divide the region and the wider world. William Denslow files this report for CNA from Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine.
Alexandra was born here in the Kharkiv region. She may be back, but she's a long way from home. Her city is now a battlefield, and her family's moved into a previously unoccupied house in disrepair, with no basic facilities, not even an indoor toilet.
С Бахмута приехали, потому что нас уже бомбили сильно, и мы решили, что уехать. Но у меня тут родственники, так я к брату приехала. Потому что как это там оставаться нельзя. Бахмут сейчас вообще нету Бахмута. Для нас больше нету его.
With a pension of less than $100 per month, she can't afford renovations here. Aid agencies have stepped in to replace windows and insulate the house from the bitter winter cold. Alexandra and her family are among the estimated 3.7 million people that are internally displaced in Ukraine. After years of war, many IDPs are struggling to make ends meet. Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy grid this winter have exacerbated the situation. Some experts say it's part of a broader demoralization campaign against the population to win concessions in peace negotiations.
People in large cities were sitting in cold with no electricity, no heat, no water for weeks. And that was Russia pressing on us and terrorizing us to sign the ugly deal.
There have been several rounds of peace talks, and the US wants a deal by the summer. But sticking points remain, especially on who gets to control territory in the Donbass region, and what kind of security guarantees would come with a ceasefire.
4 years into this war.
Policy advisor at the Munich Security Conference, Jintro Poli, says Moscow is putting up negotiation roadblocks.
It has insisted that Ukraine give up control over all 4 oblasts that Russia has illegally annexed. It has proposed caps on the Ukrainian army of 600,000 people max. It has categorically rejected any kind of substantial security guarantees for Ukraine by its international partners.
The Kremlin says it's committed to negotiations, but maintains that its own security concerns need to be addressed. But Ukrainians say the evidence is clear that Moscow is the aggressor. Here in Kharkiv, the scars of war clearly visible. And while Ukrainian authorities say they are committed to reaching a peace settlement, they say that after years of resistance, any deal must ensure that Russia can't regroup and attack again in the coming years. Defence expert and co-founder of the think tank We Build Ukraine, Alexandra Zarkina, says funding is a critical part of security guarantees.
In addition to Ukrainian army, we really need sustainable financing. So if you ask me about what type of the security guarantees we really need, we do need a fund. The fund which can have some, loans obligations behind it, but really with a stable understanding of the, money flow to allow our defense industry growing, to allow European defense industry grow.
The European Union has pledged a loan worth over $100 billion to help provide military and budgetary support for the next 2 years. Some experts say the situation calls for more economic pressure on Moscow.
There are areas of the Russian economy that remain unsanctioned, and there are many policies to stop Russia from being able to wiggle out of the sanctions through various means, backdoor means with international partners. And to keep the economic pressure on Russia is probably as important, if not more important, than the military pressure.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been lobbying the international community for more robust support. The fear is that if Moscow succeeds in dragging out negotiations, it could freeze the peace process indefinitely. For CNA, I'm William Denslow in Kharkiv, eastern Ukraine.
Earlier, we spoke with Scott Craig, a senior communications officer at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And he tells us more about the pressing humanitarian needs on the ground in Ukraine and the challenges ahead.
The humanitarian situation on the ground today is, for most people, it's the hardest it's ever been. It's been a very cold winter, as we heard in your report there. Damage and attacks on the country's energy systems have left most of them damaged or destroyed. And that has had a huge toll on people. People are getting sicker, as you would imagine, in very cold weather. But there are also their mental health, and the psychological toll of the conflict has taken a big toll on people. I was out with Red Cross teams on the ground over the weekend. And one of the things that really struck me was, we've set up these, we call them resilience hubs. They're tents with generators where people come and they get a hot meal and they can charge their devices. But one of the things that struck me about those was that some of the people going to them told me that it was an important social thing for them because they're becoming increasingly isolated in cold, dark homes. So I think 4 years into the conflict, we can say that humanitarian needs are the biggest they've ever been. And that there is a need also, as you touched on in your report, to maintain the support going forward, because that's also a critical part of the story at this juncture.
Now, Scott, aside from the scale of the needs that need to be met, are there also different types of humanitarian needs compared to 4 years ago?
Absolutely. So there's different types of needs compared to 4 years ago, and also different needs depending on where in Ukraine you are. So some needs are universal, such as the energy crisis that I was talking about. I think that's the thing that's different now compared to 4 years ago, is the systematic damage to the country's energy system and the human misery that has inflicted. And that's common across the entire country. Now, in different parts of the country, needs are slightly different. In frontline areas, there's a lot of damage to people's homes and a lot of houses that need to be reconstructed. But some needs are universal across the board. And I think the psychological toll is something that's common across the board, but again, a little bit different in frontline areas or areas where people have had to be evacuated from. But to go back to my earlier point, I think that the situation now, the human toll of this conflict is really the worst it's ever been at this point.
Now, Scott, what are the major challenges the Red Cross faces as you try to help the people in Ukraine?
The challenges vary. So obviously the security environment is a huge challenge. I was out with teams at the weekend, emergency response teams. These are teams that go out to the sites of attacks and render first aid, search and rescue afterwards. One of the things that really struck me about what the two gentlemen from the Ukrainian Red Cross were telling me was that they're obviously fearful when they go to the sites of these attacks because they're afraid that more attacks can come when they're there. But they do it anyway because it's their training, and they describe it as muscle memory, that they go out and they help people, but in the back of their mind that they're afraid that another attack could come. So I think the security environment is obviously a huge challenge. The damage to the energy infrastructure is another huge challenge. You'll hear the buzzing of generators is a kind of pretty constant refrain in the background, but you can't run a country on generators. It's a sticking plaster, but that has an impact on the ability to be able to render assistance. And I think the funding, we have a 260 million Swiss franc gap in the IFRC's appeal. That's already having an impact. I mean, you're talking about homes that are not being reconstructed, repairs that aren't being done, and cutbacks in assistance. And so I think that's another big challenge.
And ahead on Asia tonight, here are some of the stories we're also going to be covering. ASEAN reaffirming the importance of a landmark deal signed exactly 50 years ago that laid the foundation for peace and stability in the region. But experts warn rising tensions could test the bloc's unity in the years ahead. And Thailand and the US jointly host Cobra Gold Southeast Asia's largest and longest-running military exercises. These stories and more on Asia Tonight, 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time, right here on CNA. And that's everything we've got for you for this Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Your headlines anytime at cna.asia, and look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and all the socials. Thanks for watching.